They said they didn't have it. That's what my parents told me 3 years ago, standing in my kitchen while my daughter sat in a hospital bed 40 minutes away, with a tube in her arm and a number on a whiteboard that felt like a death sentence. They said they were stretched thin, that retirement had hit them harder than expected, that they wished they could help, they really did, but $58,000 was just not something they could put their hands on. I don't know why I believe them. Maybe because you don't want to think the alternative. You don't want to sit there with your child's life on a scale and wonder if the people who raised you are lying to your face. So you believe them. You go home and you apply for every grant you can find. You email the hospital's social work department 3 times a week. You set up a GoFundMe that your co-workers share until it's uncomfortable. And you believe that your parents are just 2 people on a fixed income who genuinely cannot help. I was wrong. I should go back to the beginning, not the hospital part before that. My name is Adrian. I'm 31. I live in Kitchener, Ontario, and I work as a project coordinator for a civil engineering firm. I have a daughter named Zoe. She's 9 now. 3 years ago, she was 6. And she was the kind of 6-year-old who collected smooth rocks from the driveway and named them, who would correct your grammar but still sleep with a stuffed elephant who said actually before every sentence, like she was a tiny professor of whatever she happened to be thinking about. She got sick in October. It started as fatigue, which I chalked up to starting grade 1, to the long bus ride, to the adjustment. Then it was the bruising, a bruise on her shin that spread and didn't fade for 2 weeks, a small one on her collarbone I couldn't explain. Her pediatrician ordered blood work on a Thursday and called me back the same day, which is when I knew. Doctors don't call you back the same day with good news. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. She was 6 years old. The first rounds of chemotherapy were covered. OHIP covers a lot, and the oncology team at McMaster Children's Hospital were extraordinary. But Zoe's body didn't respond the way they needed it to. After the second round, her oncologist sat my husband and me down and told us she was recommending a bone marrow transplant, that the transplant itself would be covered through the provincial health system, but that the pre-transplant workup, the compatibility testing, some of the preparatory procedures, because Zoe's case was complex, because she had a rare secondary condition that required a specialist out of sick kids in Toronto. The gap between what OHIP covered and what this particular care pathway required was going to fall on us. $42,000. I remember my husband writing the number on a notepad, just writing it down, like writing it down made it smaller or more manageable. It didn't. My husband is a plumber. He runs his own small operation, just him and one other guy. We're not poor, but we're not sitting on $42,000 either. We have a house with a mortgage. We have a car payment. We were already burning through savings to cover the time I'd taken off work to be at the hospital. So we called our families. My parents live 40 minutes away in Cambridge. My dad worked for 30 years at an insurance company and retired early. My mom taught elementary school until she was 62. They own their home outright. They have RRSPs. They're not wealthy by any stretch, but they are comfortable. They are objectively comfortable. I called my mom first. I explained the situation as calmly as I could, which means I explained it crying, sitting in the hospital parking garage because I didn't want Zoe to hear me. I told her the number. I told her what the money was for. I told her that without the pre-transplant care pathway, the transplant itself couldn't proceed, which meant Zoe would continue on chemotherapy that wasn't fully working, and that the longer we waited, the worse her odds got. My mom went quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Adrienne, you know we would do anything for Zoe. But we don't have that kind of money sitting around. Dad's pension is less than we expected. We're watching every dollar right now. I'm so sorry." 2 days later, my dad said the same thing, almost word for word. I remember thinking they must have talked about it, prepared what to say. My husband's parents tried. His dad, who was already retired and had his own health issues, emptied a small savings account and gave us $6,000. He apologized that it wasn't more. He cried. $6,000 from a man who could barely afford it, and he cried because it wasn't enough. We fundraised. We went to our church. We're not hugely religious, but we've gone for years, and the community came through in a way that still makes me tear up. We got 11,000 from strangers on the internet. My co-workers organized a raffle. My husband's friend group did a charity hockey tournament in January, the middle of winter, and raised almost $4,000 in entry fees and pledges. We got to 31,000 by February. We were still 11,000 short when Zoe's oncologist told us we were running out of time to delay. She didn't make it. I'm not going to spend a long time on this part because I don't think I have the words for it, and I don't think words are the right thing anyway. Zoe died on March the 14th, a Tuesday. She was 6 years and 4 months old. She had 27 smooth rocks in a shoebox under her hospital bed, each one with a name written on it in purple marker. The nurses let us leave them there for a while after. My husband and I took a leave from everything. We moved through the spring, like people moving through water. We went to grief counseling. We kept going. You keep going, because that's the only other option, and the other option is not acceptable. It was 14 months later when my brother mentioned something that didn't add up. My brother is 5 years older than me. We're close, or we were. He'd been living in Calgary for 7 years, working in tech. He'd been sympathetic when Zoe was sick. He called, he sent flowers, he flew out for the funeral. But we'd never been the kind of siblings who were in each other's back pockets. We were at my parents' house for my dad's birthday in May, and my brother was there with his wife. They'd flown in from Calgary. He was in a good mood, which was noticeable because he'd been going through a difficult time financially, or so I thought. At some point, he mentioned something about the new place, and my dad got a look on his face, and my mom changed the subject. I didn't think about it right away, but that night I mentioned it to my husband, and he said, "What new place?" And I realized I didn't know. I texted my brother the next day, casually, asked if he'd moved. He said, yeah, he and his wife had bought a townhouse in a suburb of Calgary. Nice area, good schools for when they have kids. I said, congratulations, when did that happen? He said, last spring, March, the same month Zoe died, the same month we were $11,000 short. I didn't jump to conclusions immediately. I'm telling you that because I want to be honest about how this actually unfolded. I told myself there were explanations. I asked my brother, over text, how the purchase went, whether they'd had to save long. He said it had actually come together pretty quickly, that they'd had some help. I sat on that for a week. I went back and forth. I told myself it wasn't what I was thinking. Then I called my mom on a Sunday afternoon, and I asked her directly, did you and Dad help my brother buy his house? She paused for a long time. Then she said, we gave him a gift. Parents are allowed to give gifts to their children. I hung up. I don't remember deciding to hang up. I just remember looking at the phone afterward and feeling something I can't name. Not quite rage. Something quieter and more total than rage. Like a door closing. I called her back that night. I needed to know the number. She didn't want to tell me. I told her she owed me that much. She finally said it, $80,000. They had given my brother $80,000 toward his down payment, the same spring that my daughter was dying, and we were begging anyone who would listen for $11,000, $80,000. I didn't speak to my parents for 8 months. I didn't speak to my brother for almost a year. My husband, who is a calmer person than I am, said we could talk about what those relationships were going to look like when I was ready, and that he would follow my lead. He always says things like that and means them, which is more than most people can say. I don't want to make this story only about the money, because the money was never really about the money. It was about sitting in a parking garage, crying on the phone to my mother, asking her to help save her granddaughter's life, and hearing her say they didn't have it. It was the performance of helplessness from 2 people who were quietly writing a 6-figure check to their son. I needed $42,000, and they gave me nothing. I needed $11,000 in February, and they had written a check for $80,000 by March. Zoe collected rocks. That's the part I keep coming back to. When I eventually And I mean eventually, because this took months of therapy and a lot of sitting with things I didn't want to sit with. I eventually had a conversation with my parents that I needed to have. My mom cried and said they felt terrible, that they'd been carrying it, that the guilt had aged them. My dad said he didn't know how to explain their reasoning, that they'd thought my brother's situation was urgent, that they'd convinced themselves the healthcare system would find a way to cover Zoe's needs. They had convinced themselves. That's the thing they said. They had convinced themselves. I said, I called you from the hospital parking garage. I told you exactly what was needed and what would happen if we didn't get it. You had the money. You made a choice. Neither of them argued with that. My brother was harder. He found out eventually what his down payment had meant in the timeline of things. He called me, genuinely shaken, and said he hadn't known what the money was for, that Mom and Dad had just offered it, and he'd assumed they had the means. I don't know if I fully believe that, even now. I don't know if it matters. He wasn't the one I'd called from the hospital. He wasn't the one who looked me in the eye and said they were broke. We are in contact now, my parents and I. My brother and I text sometimes. It's not what it was, and I don't think it will be again, and I've accepted that. Therapy helped me understand that I can choose to stay in contact with people without pretending things are fine, without performing forgiveness I don't entirely feel. My parents see me. They don't ask about Zoe much, which I think is their own guilt working on them. That's between them and whatever accounting they're doing internally. The reason I'm telling this story now is because something happened 2 months ago that I've been trying to figure out what to do with. My brother had a heart attack. He's 41. He'd had some warning signs he'd been ignoring: high blood pressure, some chest tightness he kept meaning to see someone about. He collapsed at his office in Calgary and a co-worker called 911. He was in surgery within 2 hours. He survived. But the cardiologist, when she came to speak to my parents and his wife after the surgery, said there was a complication, a structural issue with one of the valves that the surgery had revealed, that a second procedure would be needed, a more specialized one, and that there was one other thing they needed to discuss. Because of the specifics of my brother's blood type and a secondary tissue compatibility requirement I don't fully understand, the procedure they were recommending had a much better outcome probability if they had a compatible family donor for a particular biological component of the process. They tested my parents. Neither was a match. His wife's family was tested. No match. My brother has no children. And then his cardiologist's office called me. I want to tell you what it felt like to see that number on my phone. The Calgary area code. My hands went cold. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail, listened to it twice, and then sat in my car for 40 minutes. I am a match. I am apparently the best possible match for what my brother needs. The genetic stars aligned in exactly this one way. The only person who can help him is me. My therapist, when I told her, did not tell me what to do. She asked me how I felt. I said I didn't know. She said that was honest. My husband said the same thing he always says. He would follow my lead. He also said quietly, on a night when we were sitting on the back porch after putting our new dog to bed, "We got a dog last year, his name is Biscuit. Zoe would have loved him." He said, "Whatever you decide, I think you already know that the decision is only about you, not about them." And he was right. I did already know that. I called back the cardiologist's office. I asked all the questions. The procedure for me was low risk. The recovery was a few days of fatigue. The benefit to my brother was significant. The window was about 6 weeks. I called my brother's wife first. I didn't call my parents. I told her I was going to do it. She cried so hard she couldn't speak for a full minute, and I waited. I flew to Calgary on a Thursday morning. My parents were there. We sat in a waiting room together for 4 hours, and we didn't talk much. And my mom held my hand at one point without asking, and I let her. Not because everything was okay, but because she's old and she's afraid, and there are some things I can hold at the same time now that I couldn't before. The procedure went well. My brother came out of it without complications. The cardiologist said the outcome was as good as she could have hoped. He called me from his hospital room the next day, a little groggy, and said, "Adrienne, I don't know what to say. I told him he didn't have to say anything. I told him that was true, and I meant it. The words he had weren't going to be adequate, and we both knew it, and I think maybe him knowing it without me having to explain it was something. My parents took me to dinner before I flew home. My dad ordered sparkling water and held the glass without drinking it for a while. Then he said, "You're a better person than we deserved." I didn't confirm or deny that. I ate my food. I looked out the window at a Calgary February, which is brutal in a way Ontario cold isn't, and I thought about a shoebox of named rocks sitting in a hospital in Hamilton. I don't know what these relationships are going forward. I think they are going to be something, but not what they were. I think I made the choice I made because of who I want to be, not because of who they are. My therapist helped me understand those are different reasons, and that mine was valid. There's a sentence I keep coming back to, something Zoe said to me about 2 weeks before she died, on a morning when she was feeling okay enough to be herself. She was looking out her hospital window at the parking lot and she said, "Mom, the sun is doing that thing." I asked what thing. She said, "Where it looks cold, but it's actually there." I think about that a lot. I don't have a clean ending to offer. I'm still in therapy. I still drive past the road to McMaster sometimes and have to breathe through it. Biscuit sleeps at the foot of the bed now, which we said we wouldn't allow. But here we are. My husband and I are talking about what comes next, for us, for our family, in whatever form that takes. My parents are alive. My brother is alive. I am the reason my brother is alive, and I live with that in a complicated way that I think will take a long time to fully understand. Every morning when the sun comes up, I think about a little girl who said it looked cold, but it was actually there. And then I get up and I make coffee and I keep going.